Welcome to American Education FM, everybody. I'm Dr. Sean Brooks. Hi there, everybody. Welcome back. Okay, let me get into it here. A number of geopolitical things to cover kind of very quickly here off the top. I've got a few education stories per usual, and then that leads us right into jab stuff as well. And I'll finish with a, perhaps I should say, certainly a rundown of a number of different takes, of course, regarding Donald Trump and the jab taking. Again, if you've been listening to this show, you know that this is multidimensional. This is not a face value kind of approach here. Again, there's no way he was operating individually. There's a much larger plan at play here, a much larger scheme, and there's, of course, a number of people misinterpreting a number of different things. And then you have a number of individuals, again, screaming at him at the top of their lungs to come out and denounce the jabs as much as humanly possible. There, of course, is also the strategy of allowing your enemy to expel themselves as much as humanly possible and waste all of their energy and, again, expel all of their plans as much as humanly possible. Again, I'm not carrying water for Donald Trump. What I'm doing is that I'm fully understanding that there was a larger scheme at play, which was a depopulation agenda. He purposefully sped that up instead of course, keeping us all locked down and keeping us wearing masks and keeping all of those illegal mandates in place and 1,000 other things by speeding up their game. There's no doubt about that. Either way, I'll get into those particular points here in a little bit, but let me get into this first. Right now, as I'm actually talking, former special prosecutor, or special counsel, I should say, Robert Hur is testifying. He's now a private citizen, but of course worked for the federal government, and he was the one who created the report on Biden regarding the classified information. Just a few brief things with this. First of all, there isn't anything new that's being brought up in his testimony. The report was relatively clear. I mean, we fully get it. What we also understand, though, is that the reason that either he isn't bringing charges against Joe Biden for illegal possession of classified information is usually for a few things, in particular regarding what we know is actually going on. Number one, there is a continuity of government in place. And again, I've been over that at length too on this show, as I know a number of other people have as well. There's ample evidence to prove that that's the case. So there is that element. With that element, and it's a very important element, again, running under certainly the educated hypothesis and or conclusion that Donald Trump signed the Insurrection Act back in 2021, which there's ample evidence that that too is the case, that would imply, of course, that Joe Biden's not really the legal president. Or if he is the president, he's the president of a failed corporation called the United States of America. So given all of that, one of the major reasons, of course, why a number of these prosecutors or special counsels don't convict, again, is usually for a variety of reasons. Number one, let's examine the previous one that I just mentioned. Joe Biden's not really the elected president of the United States. I'm sure that limits one's ability to then prosecute such an individual to some extent. Number two, it's quite possible that there's more than enough ample evidence to clearly show that no court, regular court proceeding, so to speak, outside of a military tribunal could actually take place regarding Joe Biden and what he has done and what his family has done. We're talking about international espionage. Again, as a political official, this isn't something that gets handled in your average court. This isn't something that goes on in a federal court. This isn't something that would go on, of course, in your local town court. This is something that would have to take place in an actual military tribunal. It goes that deep, and the evidence is that vast, I think. And then I would say third, there's also sort of this blind admission in the middle of all of this, whether people can catch it or not, that the judicial system, as we know and fully understand, is completely corrupt also. And it's not that they operate on fact, it's that they also operate on belief. And one of the things that Robert Hur said in his testimony rather consistently, and frankly it sounded just like every other investigator, so to speak, or certainly an individual who would recommend prosecution, and I'm using that in finger quotes, he sounded a little bit like James Comey back around July 4th of 2016 when he openly came out and said no reasonable prosecution can occur or would occur regarding Hillary Clinton and her classified information. Now, of course, we know that James Comey's dirty, and we know that Hillary Clinton is a murderer, and 1,000 other things. But what we also know is that that too was an admission that he's not wrong. James Comey wasn't wrong when he actually said that. He was openly stating, again, sort of in a backhanded way or an upside down sort of hidden way, you're not going to get a conviction from anybody regarding Hillary Clinton because, well, it's just not going to happen. Too many people like her at the time, certainly enough deep state players like her, enough people in the judiciary like her, and it's not about what's right and what's wrong and what's legal and what's not. It's about who's blackmailed, who isn't, who can get paid off, who won't, who's going to get murdered as a result of prosecuting somebody and who won't, and 1,000 other things. It's corruption. So again, they're not asking the why. They're not asking in the her testimony. They're not saying, so why is it that you didn't prosecute him? We fully understand that you're telling people that there isn't ample evidence enough to actually prosecute, but why? And the answer again is all of those three reasons that I just mentioned, but it's also because again, they know that they can't possibly get any kind of a objective jury, let alone a judge, to actually look at this information and rule against Biden. They're afraid of what would happen as a result of that. And again, that right there should show people the tipping point that our country is in. They have no problem going after Donald Trump. They have no problem pinning a million things on him, accusing him of being a rapist when there was, of course, no evidence that ever occurred whatsoever with that Jean Carroll gal. And it just continues to show, again, the double standard of everything here. Just, again, both sides of the equation barking at one another over something that's relatively objective, but at the exact same time, no one's going a dimension higher, even just one dimension higher and saying, okay, but why aren't you prosecuting? Is it because, again, the judiciary is corrupt? Is it because you can't get a logical jury? Or they could ask this, they could say, is it because that there's more than enough ample evidence to actually prosecute him in a military tribunal for treason, sedition, espionage, and other things? See, they're not going to ask that question even as Republicans because they don't want people to believe that such a thing could occur. And sort of in summary regarding the her testimony, it goes back to a point I've said numerous times in numerous episodes, which is we have to see something we've never seen before. See, that right there is something we've never seen before. We've never even heard of it. We've never heard of a military tribunal taking place in our country, not in recent memory anyway, of a politician that is well known, that almost everyone knows, in particular a current or ex-president, and then going after them with everything that the law has on this individual, and then, of course, either imprisoning them for life, but as we know, if there's endless other crimes that have occurred, in particular treason and sedition, then the penalty is death. This is something we have not seen. And unfortunately, one of the reasons we haven't seen it is, yes, not only because everything is corrupt that is in place, but it's also because there's always this hidden, veiled threat that if such a thing did occur, then there would be some kind of a civil war, that there would be protests on the streets, or there would be this, or there would be that. But I would just encourage people, again, to go back to those Q drops, because there are Q drops where it clearly says military is the only way. The reaction will be swift. There will be riots, but our response will be swift. That would almost indicate, again, that they're planning on doing something potentially in the future to hold these individuals accountable in the way that we want, and that they are anticipating rioting to take place in the streets and the burning of buildings and whatever else, because, again, people will start to lose their minds. But as we also know, and this is also part of what that Q operation was about and everything that we're seeing now, is that an emotional response would be far less if more people are knowledgeable about what's really going on. See, the more knowledge we acquire over the course of time, the less emotional we become and the less reactive. And I mean, that's just a fact. That's just the way that it works. So, not to bring back again the Oxford, Michigan school board meeting where I spoke, but I use that as an example because that right there should show people how people react when they don't know what's going on. They react emotionally, and then, of course, they run away and they panic and they scream and they shout and they do what they do. What we also know, of course, is that other individuals in other locations run up and down streets and vandalize automobiles and set things on fire and 1,000 other things. But the more that people acquire knowledge, the less likely they are to react emotionally or irrationally. And yes, it'll hurt a great deal of people, and some people might take their own lives, and some people are going to have a hard time grasping the fact that they've been lied to and that they've believed things that aren't real. But it's possible, again, that an outward emotional reaction would be diminished the more knowledge that is acquired among an individual or a group of individuals. So I have no doubt that all of this is happening on purpose. I have no doubt this is all occurring to, again, minimize the likelihood of a physical civil war within our country, although, as I've said before, we're seeing it already in numerous professions. And of course, throughout the country in numerous ways. We're not picking up muskets and running after each other in a field. But what we are doing is there's massive division within endless lines of work and endless professions. And then, of course, certainly division between the government and the people. But again, one of the things, I have to keep saying it, one of the things, again, that's going to unify a great deal of people, including people who would have disagreed in the past, is by showing the collective, showing both sides the truth. It really is only the truth that will make us free. It isn't anything else. If we keep lying to one another, gaslighting one another, telling half-truths all of the time, that helps no one. But I do understand that there has to be a slow roll of information to make it easily digestible, because if you cram these red pills down people's throats by the handful, they can't swallow them. They have to be one at a time and over the course of time. And yeah, it's exhausting for a great deal of us who, of course, have had to, watch this entire breakdown for a very long time. But if that means that less people lose their lives as a result, then I guess that's a good thing. And certainly if it keeps the foundations of our country in all of the right ways together, again, via a continuity of government, which I have ample evidence that that's still the case and continuing to be the case, then that's a good thing too. So I just wanted to, again, provide a couple of things regarding the Robert Hur testimony and a couple of takes on that. And again, in typical fashion, the left during these testimonies has nothing. They really don't have a defense. Their only defense, so they think, is consistently bashing Donald Trump and bringing him up and saying, well, Trump did this and Trump did that and, blah, 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 blah. And then they just use it as a political speech. Well, it is an election year after all. And that's going to be the case. I mean, they're going to do that because they don't have a foot to stand on. So there you go. Okay. Couple other things here. A couple of random posts that I caught, took some screenshots of, and I wanted to bring them to your attention. Just some food for thought here. These first two that I'm going to read come from greatawakening.win. Again, I've been kicked off that board numerous times, including recently, but I'm back on yet again. And this one specifically had to do with the cell service outages. And I thought this was interesting. Again, I'm not entirely sure how to interpret this, but let's take this person at face value just for a second. It was titled, Cell Service Outages, the Reality of It. It says, quote, I work as a telecom engineer troubleshooting programming the Ciena, C-I-E-N-A, 5164 optical router used for Verizon and AT&T. These companies and many of my colleagues know exactly what it was, but the more interesting part that raised some eyebrows was the fact that CC payment processing and emergency services /SOS/911 calls were possible for most of the affected customers. This is key. This all runs on the same fiber optic network and should have been down also. I cannot overstate how anomalous the above fact pattern is, because when our networks go down, they don't go down in this piecemeal way. Here's the takeaway. They said the goal of the cyber weapon, quote unquote, is maximum disruption. Whoever deployed, and then in parentheses they put tested, this cyber tool, quote unquote, went to great lengths to pause communication only. The surgeon scalpel approach we saw was a much more difficult task than to just nuke the whole system, so to speak. A tool like this would need to be tested a few times to ensure a reliable partitioning of the target, quote unquote, calls data and the not target, quote unquote, 911 and carbon copy processing. It says, I'm a patriot who loves their country, so I will not say what it was or is, but if you read or reread, the above a few times and ask yourself the right questions, logical deduction should provide the answer, unquote. Again, I interpret this as being a good thing. The good guys know that the bad guys want to kill the system, that they want to bring down the telecommunications system to confuse people and throw people into chaos. But what the good guys also know is that they don't want the 911 or SOS system to go down. And even again in Britain with the 999 system, which is our version of the 911 system, same kind of thing. They don't want those systems to go down, but they do want particular communications to be shut off. Or again, if the bad guys want communications to be shut off, the good guys still want to keep those good systems in place and keep those up and running for rather obvious reason. So that's my interpretation of it. Again, if we're taking and believing this person at face value, they're basically saying someone else is playing with this, basically, that they think they're doing it on purpose and that they're doing it for a good reason. Because again, as even they said, it would take test runs to make sure that them pulling the plug on the whole system would still allow particular communications to remain in place. So if we examine this more objectively, I have no doubt that there's multiple wars going on behind the scenes, of which I'm not sure we can possibly imagine on a day in and day out basis. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. And again, if that person is to be believed, then that is their, that's their interpretation of the situation. Okay. There's also this. When it comes to communication, in particular airplanes, I'm sure you're fully aware that there are multiple airplane outages and malfunctions and 1,000 other things happening with airplanes these days. I don't think it's beyond the realm of a possibility that the bad guys want to take down an airplane in the United States filled with Americans. And here's this person's take also. This was from greatawakening.win, and they said the following. They titled it, So Over the Deep State Sabotage of Airplanes. They said 50 injured overnight on Lantham flight. It says the system controlling systems, Deep State, is now trying to sabotage the travel industry, which is my livelihood. The pattern is there. After years upon years of safe travel in the airline industry, there's several mishaps a week now, and it's just a matter of time before we have a crash. The right to travel has been a target of the deep state for 4 years now. Notice that the mishaps have not yet resulted in a crash. It's just about instilling fear now. But if our travel behavior doesn't change, it will get worse. The deep state loves it. People boarding planes petrified that their flight will be the one that crashes. There's not a day that goes by that they don't keep one-upping themselves as murderous psychopaths, unquote. Now, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, this occurred certainly during my 9/11 wake-up a number of years ago. Of course, with there being no planes on 9/11. But at the exact same time, there was ample evidence from first-hand accounts of individuals in the airline industry back then, again during 2021 and before then, that there was technology in place where planes could be remote controlled and instantly taken over by a database in a control center. So that if they needed to down planes or if they needed to, again, emergency land them or 1,000 other things, that they could do that. Which, of course, begs the question, why have the pilot in the first place? But even so, given the fact that much of that technology has to be ubiquitous now across all airlines, if not within all airplanes, and again, that would be a question for a pilot, not me. Again, I'm just running off of memory here, so if I'm wrong, I apologize. But what's keeping anybody, again, from accessing one of these airplanes and just downing it permanently? I have no idea. Again, I'm not hoping this happens, and I'm not trying to instill fear with people. But as the person said in their post, and I think they're right, this is worth considering. Again, you talk about a distraction event. You talk about it being a very unfortunate distraction to take people's attention off of, say, a prosecution of someone, or someone losing an election, or someone winning an election, or anything happening. And then again, you remotely down a plane, and then it gets blamed, of course, for a Boeing piece not working or something else not working, or, somebody blames it on a diversity hire. Again, those would be the common excuses. Certainly, I think that the quote-unquote normies would be likely to believe, because those are the stories that are being pushed right now in the mainstream narrative. But the one consideration that, of course, wouldn't be admitted to in the public is that these planes can be remote controlled, and that the engines can be cut remotely by someone else on the ground, or even by someone else perhaps in an adjacent airplane. Again, whether it be some kind of hacking, or it actually be some kind of an electromagnetic pulse, that's not for me to decide, but it's certainly an option. And again, it's an election year, so it's war. And this is one of the ways, of course, that you wage war against your own people. You gaslight them with a variety of stories, again, about diversity hires and Boeing being, a bad company. And then, of course, regulators, not checking all the boxes all of the time. Again, there's an undercover video, which will be in the next war video, that shows an individual working for Boeing, again, taking undercover footage of people who were working on these airplanes, and it said something like 10 out of 15 of them, when they were simply asked, would you fly this airplane or fly in this airplane, and they all said no. The 10 out of 15 of them said no. And now, of course, you have a Boeing whistleblower who's allegedly been found dead, who was either set to testify or was testifying. Again, all of this is shaping a narrative for an actual plane crash, but it's shaping the narrative for a plane crash to occur, but not for the reasons that it would really occur. You see what I mean? Again, they're gaslighting the public, potentially, I think, to believe that, again, it would be a manufacturing error, when in fact it wouldn't be. It would just be a remote takedown of an airplane. So again, I'm not trying to scare people. You heard me say it a long time ago. I don't fly on airplanes anymore. I haven't since 2019, and I don't plan on ever flying again. And I don't know. I can just piece these things together and then look at the larger picture from a different dimension and say, well, what are they feeding the public in the general storyline? And then, are there more nefarious ways to take down airplanes? Again, it's like, put it in this category. It's much like the East Palestine train wreck, or any of these food manufacturing facilities, of course, going up in flames. What are the people told about those things and those events? And then, of course, look at it from a different dimension. What's the real reason that they're occurring? Who's really doing it? And then, of course, why is it really happening? And then the next question, why is no one going to jail for any of it? All those fires of all these factories and all these plants, and they haven't arrested a single person for arson. Why? Again, is it possible that there's good guys burning these places down because bad things are happening there? That's a possibility. Is it possible that they're catching on fire all of the time and we're catching on fire all of the time because again, good things are happening there and they're manufacturing all kinds of good food and the bad guys don't want that? It's possible. Are they trying to slow roll the food production and increase the cost of food by, again, burning down these manufacturing facilities? It's possible. Again, killing all of the cattle with direct energy weapons and fires in parts of Texas where it's never occurred before, ever in the history of man? Yes. There's multiple dimensions here. That's all I'm trying to say. Again, take a look at what the media shows you at face value and then look at it from a different dimension. Let me show you this too. This is interesting. This was tossed to me by my Michigan business friend, who I've met face to face, by the way. So this is a real person, just letting everybody know. But again, they received this letter in the mail in Michigan, as did many individuals apparently, but it's certainly political pandering, without a doubt. They're trying to get people in Michigan to believe that a Democrat legislature is the way forward in Michigan. And look what we did as Democrats, and we're giving you your money back to some extent, even though it's pennies on the dollar. But they're basically touting this particular tax credit, apparently, that just went out. So here's the letter they received, I want to say a couple of weeks ago. It says, quote, "Dear friend," again, Lansing, Michigan at the top. It says, "Great news. On behalf of the state of Michigan, I am thrilled to inform you that you are receiving a refund check from your 2022 tax return because of legislation passed and signed in 2023 to quintuple the working families tax credit. Your check is enclosed." It says, "In addition to this refund, you may also be eligible for the tax credit for tax year 2023 and beyond. Please be sure to file your 2023 taxes in a timely manner and verify your eligibility. Even if you do not owe tax, both the federal Earned Income Tax Credit, EITC, and Michigan Working Families Tax Credit could lead to a tax refund, exclamation point." It says this accomplishment is a result of our new Democratic majority in the legislature. See? Little gaslighting there. "I was proud to sign this into law to help hardworking people get the relief they deserve. 700,000 Michigan families, including yours, are receiving a refund check from the Expand Working Families Tax Credit. Checks like the one you are receiving will directly benefit nearly 1 million kids. Half the children in Michigan, they say. Together we also rolled back the retirement tax to save 500,000 senior households an average of $1,000. Ooh, all the savings. It says your hard work and dedication are the foundation of our great state. I hope these dollars back in your pocket help you and your family pay the bills, put food on the table, and take care of each other. Wishing you and your family all the best. Sincerely, Gretchen Whitmer, Governor of Michigan." And how much money did they receive back in a check? It was just over $200. That's it. And it's their own money. So again, you talk about political pandering and gaslighting during an election year. All of this money is going to do everybody a favor, in particular the children. So here's your own taxed money back that we stole from you in the first place that was yours to begin with. And oh, by the way, it's a measly 200 some odd dollars. Unbelievable. But again, it's an election year. This is This is just what happens. This is what's happening. Don't know what else to say. With the election year, of course, in mind, there is also this. The FBI is tracking all of us, as we know, and they are tracking us for rather specific reasons. So, as I've said in the past before, if you're not on an FBI checklist of some kind, or some kind of an FBI three-letter agency list, you're not doing it correctly. And you're not defending your country, ladies and gentlemen. So let's all work harder and get on those lists, shall we? Let's get every single American citizen on the FBI watch list. This comes from the Office of Private Sector with the FBI. And essentially, they have set up what is called a secret portal called DSAC. And I put this out on Gab the other day, and I simply said the federal government has been illegally surveilling and building profiles for Americans in the secret portal called DSAC for those who oppose firearm restrictions, lockdowns, and vaccine mandates, and or support border security, and are labeling them as domestic extremists. So there's that. And again, specifically from this document, it states the following. The potential for shifts in various policies many DVEs may perceive to oppose or threaten their ideological goals and agendas, or feed into existing narratives many DVEs subscribe to regarding the U.S. government's exercise of power, influence, and initiatives, possibly including firearm legislation, the easing of immigration restrictions, and new limits on the use of public land. It says some DVEs discontent with renewed measures to mitigate the spread of COVID-19 and ordered dissemination of COVID-19 vaccinations and the efficacy and or safety of COVID-19 vaccinations, unquote. So if it wasn't before 2020 that they were monitoring us and keeping tabs on us, which we can assume that they certainly were, it was certainly during 2020 and the years after, all the way to now, regarding all of these particular, of course, government narratives that they're pushing out there, that they want everybody to comply with. And well, if you didn't comply, and you were out there getting online and telling people to not comply, and then speaking up and speaking out and sharing particular news stories about how our rights are being infringed, well, you're on a list. And heaven forbid you gave a school board speech where you told the truth, because, well, you're on a list then. And heaven forbid you gave any kind of a speech publicly, or you have any kind of a recording audio show of any kind, because you can assume you're on a list. And to that I say, great. Excellent. That just means we're doing it correctly. That means we're actually defending our constitutional rights the way that they should be, and, well, that's just the way that it is, and good. Speaking of that, let me give them another reason to put me on a list. There's this one. This is from shootingnewsweekly.com. Are you listening, FBI? California SB 1160 will register and annually tax every gun in the state. This is California. This is a proposed Senate bill. It says very briefly, every single gun registered and taxed repeatedly. Every single gun owner taxed annually for each and every gun. It says those of you who thought gun control didn't matter because they weren't going after you or your gun, we told you this was always part of their plan. They want to know about every single gun in the state and every single gun owner. And they are going to charge you a fee on each and every gun you have every single year. It says, what about your plinker? ? Registered and taxed annually. Your hunting shotgun? Registered and taxed annually. We warned you. Now here it is in black and white. The California legislature is moving to pass Senate Bill 1160. No one is safe from this. Every gun owner in California will be affected, and they will have to pay the state for the privilege, quote unquote, of owning a gun for sport or to defend your family. Those on the sidelines, are you awake now? Unquote. And that was written by CRPA President Chuck Michael on X. And there you go. Again, shall not be infringed, seems unconstitutional, should take only one judge in the state of California to strike this down almost immediately, and I'm shocked it hasn't happened yet, but perhaps it has to reach another level in order for it to be struck down ultimately. And again, it would certainly be nice if things like this hit their way to the Supreme Court, and then the Supreme Court simply opens up the Constitution to the Second Amendment, reads it clearly, and then applies the law as the way that it is to be applied. So there's that. Okay. One more here. One more reason to be on a FBI watch list. This is from Fox13News.com out of Florida. It is titled, Bill to Lower Gun Buying Age Passes in Florida House. Now, this one surprised me. I actually thought that in the state of Florida you could buy a gun, specifically, I should say, a rifle or a shotgun, if you were 18 years or older. But apparently, that's not the case. Apparently, it's 21 years old for every firearm in the state of Florida, but not so if this ends up passing. So here's some audio with this one. Give this a listen in 3, 2, 1.
Controversial gun legislation is moving forward in the state legislature in Tallahassee right now. This bill would lower the minimum age to buy rifles and shotguns from 21 down to 18, and it passed a vote in the House today. Fox 13's Kylie Jones has been following this for us, joins us live in our newsroom tonight. Hi there, Kylie. This one's got a lot of people talking all across Florida.
Mark, it certainly does. The bill would reverse legislation that came down after the shooting at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland. The proposed legislation is expected to face roadblocks, but it certainly has lawmakers divided.
Shame on us. Shame on us. We told the citizens of Florida that we were going to protect them.
Every American has the right to defend themselves. That's why it's the Second Amendment. We need to do more to make sure Americans are protected against any threat at any time.
Florida House Bill 1223 could be turning back time. The state house voted in favor of lowering the age requirement to buy rifles and shotguns back down from 21 to 18, just 6 years after it was enacted. It was signed into law weeks after the deadly shooting at Parkland's Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School.
Today should serve as an example to the entire country that government can and must move fast. I said at the beginning of this process less than 3 weeks ago that we have to be very careful as we balance our individual rights with our need for public safety.
The Parkland shooting once fueled legislation to raise the age to buy rifles and shotguns. And some lawmakers want to keep it that way.
We have a crisis in America, ladies and gentlemen, and the age is part of the problem.
But on Friday, other state lawmakers pushed to reverse this.
They have the rights granted to them by God and that are enshrined in our Second Amendment. And by God, with this vote this morning, we're going to restore those rights to them once and for all.
The House stayed largely within party lines in a 76-35 vote to pass this bill. Federal law still bars anyone under 21 from buying handguns. One other key point in all of this, the Senate does not have a similar bill at this moment. In fact, Senate President Kathleen Passidomo has long said she has no desire to lower the age. And with so little time before the end of the session, there's really no chance of this becoming law for the time being. But the topic, again, is certainly getting attention.
Sure. All right, Kylie, thanks very much.
Yes, I forgot about that. I forgot about all of that, as a matter of fact. That's why when I lived in Florida, the gun age was 18. That's why. It was the old Marjorie Stoneman Douglas thing. That whole charade. Now again, I have to be honest with you. I don't know what happened there. I really don't. Was Nicholas Cruz the lone gunman? Were there more gunmen? Was there even a shooting? I'll be honest, I don't know. I don't have ample evidence one way or another. But that was Rick Scott's voice at the end when he was the governor of Florida. Or at least he could have been senator at that point, I'm not entirely sure. But either way, I think he was the governor then. He was the one who put that into place. He was the one who helped raise the age in order to buy a firearm. So yes, it needs to be reduced back to the way that it was before. No doubt about it. And again, ladies and gentlemen, it's the politicians in office who are voting to restrict your gun rights. That's why the Second Amendment was written in the first place. It was to defend us against them. That's the whole point. Absolutely incredible. They just won't quit. They won't quit until we're all unarmed or paying extra taxes on guns we already own. Absolutely outrageous. Okay. Well, hopefully it gets reversed. Because again, apparently it's only been a law for 6 years, but yeah, reverse it. And all gun laws like that should be reversed. Absolutely outrageous. But that right there should prove to you also how they use these real/manufactured school shootings in order to strip you of your rights. William Cooper wrote about that at length in Behold a Pale Horse. He wasn't kidding. This has always been the strategy. And look what's happened in the state of Michigan. Same thing. Ironic, isn't it? Not a coincidence whatsoever. Okay. Speaking of something else that isn't a coincidence and moving into education news here, of course, I've been over Kristi Noem, the governor of South Dakota, and her anti-Semitic nonsense that she's engaging in regarding that ridiculous word. And, we're aligning ourselves as a state with the definition and the constant working and evolving definition of anti-Semitism and blah, blah, blah. Well, ladies and gentlemen, at the University of South Dakota, this is an allowed course. And this is just allowed as a either presentation or certainly campus jargon in order to, of course, brainwash numerous individuals. Now, keep in mind, if this were Jewish individuals that this was being targeted against, well, it wouldn't be allowed. It would be called anti-Semitic. But remember, if it happens against white people, then it's allowed. So this, again, is from the University of South Dakota, and I ripped this off of John Kincannon's Gab account, so thank you for putting this out there. But it is titled Inclusive Science Initiative. And there's a picture here of what appears to be certainly 5 white people. And it is titled Exploring Cultural Awareness, Whiteness, University of South Dakota. It says, whiteness as a cultural concept. Quote, in the context of the United States, whiteness has been viewed as the standard for norms and values since colonization. Examples of white norms and values that dominate our society include holidays based on Christian religions, aesthetics related to European culture, strict adherence to time, schedules, use of the scientific method, patriarchal values and competition, the nuclear family and independence, to name a few. Isn't it great? It sounds like heaven, doesn't it? Oh, it just sounds like heaven. So what's the problem? I'm still trying to figure out what the problem is. It goes on, it says leveraging white privilege. It has 3 bullet points here. Number 1, the concept of white privilege draws to attention the specific racial advantages that whites have over other races. Number 2, in recent years, there has been a significant push to call to attention white privilege and to end the cycle of institutional white supremacy. And number 3, often there is a response by white people to shy away from topics of race and whiteness, in part due to guilt and shame. This response has been labeled white fragility, quote unquote, by Robin DiAngelo, a critical whiteness scholar. And here's the problem, of course, with all of that. No, we don't shy away from topics of race or whiteness because of guilt or shame. We shy away from it because it's fake. It's pretend. You're making all of this up. And again, to have the governor and multiple governors across the United States put anything into law or even the slow roll of manipulating words that are made up and then doubling down on those made up words to ultimately create laws, whether they be hate crimes or the interpretation of a hate crime against anyone else who isn't white, at the expense, of course, of whites, is beyond unconstitutional. It's treachery. It's sedition. You're destroying the people who live here legally to cater to a minority. Again, I'm not seeing a lot of these crimes that are occurring where gangs of whites are attacking a singular black person in a K-12 school and beating their skull into the ground. Because just the other day, it was black females beating the skull of a white girl into the concrete ground. And she's now damaged beyond recognition. Again, I'm not seeing white individuals coming up behind black individuals at an ATM and assaulting and battering them as they steal their own money out of an ATM. I'm not seeing that. I'm not seeing whites shoot other whites in broad daylight in Philadelphia. I'm not seeing that. So it's not because I'm blind to it because my skin color says that I'm blind to it. No, and I'm not seeing it because it's not happening. It's just not happening. Here's the suggested reading, by the way, on this Exploring Cultural Awareness Whiteness thing from the University of South Dakota. Their suggested reading, and the references here are the following. A book by some name that I cannot pronounce and won't even try, titled The Beautiful Skull and Blumenbach's Errors, The Birth of the Scientific Concept of Race. That's the first one. Robin DiAngelo's White Fragility, Why It's So Hard for White People to Talk About Racism. And then Judy Katz, Jewish, her book, titled White Awareness, Handbook for Anti-Racism Training. The next one is from a Helen Neville, a Miguel Gallardo, and a Daryl Wing, and an Ed Sue. I don't know, Wing Ed Sue. I don't know if that's all the same name. Either way, their book is titled The Myth of Racial Color Blindness, Manifestations, Dynamics, and Impact. The next one, by an Audrey Smedley and a Brian D. Smedley, titled Race in North America, Origin and Evolution of a Worldview, rather. The next one, by a Carol Wright and other authors, History and Growth of the United States, the Census from 1790 to 1890. And then finally, the last one, written by some Chinese individuals, titled, quote, Integrating Ecosystem Services Trade-Offs into Environmental Flows Decisions for something lake. I don't know, some engineering paper of some kind. It makes no sense. None of it makes any sense because it's all pretend. That's all. It's racism, ladies and gentlemen. If racism is actually a word and actually exists, that right there defines it. But remember, they get away with it. And they get away with it because, well, they're openly not white, and they're saying that they're not white, and they somehow get to have all of these legal protections because they're not white. This can't stand. Things like this, again, have to be completely unconstitutional. And where are the lawyers? I mean, where are the lawyers and the judges? We know where they are. They're all afraid of losing their licenses these days. And of course, where does that fear come from? What tactic does that come from? It's Bolshevism. And Bolshevism is Jewish. So, there you go. That's why people aren't going after Governor Noem and saying what you're doing is unconstitutional. And of course, what's their legal defense for what they're doing in South Dakota? Their legal defense is all we're doing is we're agreeing to a working definition of what anti-Semitism is. But we know the long game. The long game is they're going to keep playing that game until it becomes completely illegal to question anybody who happens to be Jewish or have any influence with Jews. Again, it's unconstitutional, ladies and gentlemen. The rubber is meeting the road here in ways that, frankly, it never has before, and the awareness is at a heightened level the way that it never has before, and I'm telling you, once you become aware of this fact, it doesn't go away. There's no burying your head in the sand. There's no sweeping this one under the rug. This is a bridge that once it gets crossed, there's no turning around. So keep that in mind going forward, and certainly pay attention to more of these infringements of our rights, because it's happening. Okay, more education stuff. Cicely sent this my way from New Mexico. You talk about gaslighting. This right here is a perfect follow-up to stories that I brought up in the past that she sent my way regarding New Mexico schools. Very briefly, you may recall that New Mexico schools, certainly during, or I should say after, the abusive nonsense of the whole fake pandemic and fake COVID thing, that school districts across New Mexico were going to 4-day work weeks. And they were going to 4-day work weeks for a variety of reasons. There's less teachers, there's less students. They want to turn the lights off on the 5th day of the week to save some money. And again, they view it as a money-saving opportunity, so they think. And they also, of course, pass that idea around to school teachers as an incentive to work there. Because who wouldn't want to work on a 4-day work week and have a 3-day weekend starting on a Friday every single week? Well, as it turns out now, New Mexico has basically reversed that and then made it next to impossible for a school district to actually qualify to be a 4-day work week now. See how they control everybody? See how they abuse everyone? Again, it is gaslighting, and gaslighting is psychological torture. You're turning down the lamp and you're telling them that it's not getting darker in the room when it is getting darker in the room. And again, they just lead them around by the back of the neck, and they all fall for it every single time. These teachers are being abused, and these students are being abused, and the families who participate are being abused on a constant basis, and they just keep signing up for the abuse. And you wonder why no one's learning in these environments. Because they're filled with the brainwashed and the abused. That's why. They're the tool of government. And government means mind control. So this is from their KOBchannel4.com. It is titled, New Mexico Implements 180-Day School Year. What You Need to Know. Give this audio a listen in 3, 2, 1.
Well, we knew it was coming, but today it's official. Our state now has a rule requiring kids attend school for 180 days. This was a controversial proposal with plenty of opposition, especially from our rural school districts. But there are a few possible exceptions to the rule. Let's take a closer look.
I'd like to announce that New Mexico Public Education Department will be moving forward with what's become known as the 180 rule.
Under a new rule, New Mexico kids will have to go to school for a minimum of 180 days starting next school year. The announcement Thursday didn't come as a surprise, though. The PED held meetings last year and got feedback on the plan. There was pushback, especially from rural New Mexico school districts, which operate on a 4-day-a-week schedule.
We're not Albuquerque. We're not a huge Las Cruces. They can do unique things we can't do. But we can also do unique things that they can't do.
State lawmakers attempted to block the 180 rule with an amendment in the state budget. But Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham used her line-item veto powers to remove that amendment.
So we're doing this now because it's what's right for kids.
The final rule does try to address some concerns. 4-day-a-week calendars are allowed, and there are some exceptions.
And so we do have a waiver process in place that would allow districts to have a waiver that would not require them to meet the 180 rule, but they'd have to be able to show positive outcomes when it comes to reading performance in their schools and in their districts.
Schools with an overall reading language arts proficiency rate of 80% or more are exempt from the rule. Schools below that 80% mark will have to show growth in proficiency in order to qualify for a waiver. Schools below 45% proficiency will have to show 15 points of growth. Schools between 45 and 65% will have to show 10 points of growth, and schools between 65 and 80% will show 8 points of growth.
And they're not going to be able to do that because, well, unfortunately, New Mexico is 51st in the United States in education in all parameters after Washington, D.C. So, good luck. Good luck with all of that. Again, they're using the 4-day work week now as an incentive to raise your literacy and comprehension in reading and writing and so on rates, and it's not going to work. Whether it comes up 5 points, 8 points, 10 points, I mean, good luck. Not to mention, if it does, I'm sure there's going to be a little cheating involved regarding individuals in the district fudging the books in order to, again, become eligible again for a 4-day work week. It's unbelievable. the sheer corruption, the constant corruption of back and forth. We promise you this. Oh, now that you've had this for so long, we're just going to snatch it away from you. But don't worry, we'll give it back to you if you just perform a little bit better. Again, government incentives of this nature are always disgusting. They're beyond disgusting, and it happens all of the time in numerous states, but the states that do it the most are usually always the worst. Again, if what they're proposing was a viable plan and somehow proved to individuals that if you gave them a 4-day work week as an incentive, that all the scores would just dramatically increase, they would implement that plan in every state in the United States. And it doesn't exist. But again, you heard the one individual speaking on with regards to rural schools, that, we've been doing this in rural schools and it works great, and we're not Albuquerque, and what works here doesn't always work there, and blah, blah, blah. Well, right. That's correct. Except what that individual doesn't understand is it's communism. The last thing that a governor who is a communist would want in an entire state is education being different from location to location. It goes against the whole communistic playbook. They want everything to be the same across the board. Now, yes, they raised and differentiated, I should say, the standards that individuals have to apparently achieve in order to attain a 4-day work week again if they want one, or a 4-day school week if they want one. Where again, if your literacy rate is in the tank at around 60 to 65 or 68%, then it only has to go up 8 points. Well, congratulations. But again, if it's hovering around the 70% range and it needs to get up to over 80%, good luck with that. Again, the vast majority of schools, unfortunately, in the United States of America always, and I mean always, hover around the 70 to 72 to 73 or 75% range when it comes to literacy. Always. Again, wrap your head around that alone. Literacy should be 100% in every building. Everybody should be able to read. Everybody should be able to write the English language fluently, speak it fluently, and comprehend what it is that they're reading. But why don't they? They don't because it's purposely designed to be stupid. It's purposely designed to be dumbed down for everybody. Everybody uses different tools. Everybody uses different gimmicks, different technology, different programs, and all it does is retard people's growth. You heard me bring up again specifically regarding literacy back in 2020 when I was homeschooling my niece and nephew, and I was watching the district's program for teaching these kindergarten, first grade students how to read. It was beyond embarrassing. It was this computer-based program where all you're doing is relying on sight words and you're not actually saying the word. You're hearing the word, and then you're taking a couple of letters and you're moving them over to make a full word that, again, is connected to other letters. But then the computer is saying to you what the word is, but you're not saying it. That spits in the face of every piece of known fact regarding how to read, and how to learn how to read and comprehend. You have to say it out loud. But you don't have to do that when you have headphones on in a room full of other individuals who are generally your own age, and all you're doing is clicking on a mouse and staring at a screen. There's no way that anybody's going to achieve a 75 or higher, or certainly a 100% literacy rate as a school if that's the programs, or those are the programs rather, that are being widely adopted and widely used. And the amount of money that the district spends on those bullshit programs is actually more than what it would cost to buy every single student copies of the McGuffey readers and have them read out loud. And again, remember how cliche it was back in certainly old footage, again, a long time ago, certainly in the 1900s, and way before that as well. But when a teacher would read a particular section and then all of the students would repeat that very sentence at the exact same time. I mean, remember sort of that old practice? It almost wouldn't matter the sentence. It could be a sentence out of a children's book, or it could be an actual historic fact. But the children are all looking at the exact same book, and they're all following along. And then they all have to say what it is that they're actually reading and what's verbally been said, and they have to say it out loud. That's how you get somebody to read. That's really how you get them to read very quickly. And that's how you get them, again, to comprehend. And comprehension, as you know, requires asking questions. So let's read a paragraph, and then we'll ask questions about it and ask what it means. That's comprehension. They're not even doing that in school. They just have them so distracted with 4-day work weeks and all these ridiculous incentives that they're not focusing on the real reason why they're supposed to be there in the first place. But remember, it's an immovable business. It's purposely designed to keep educators from doing the thing that is right, and that they may know is an actual better way of doing things. So, it's not an accident, ladies and gentlemen. It's a giant on purpose. Okay. Moving on and sort of sliding into the vaccine mandate stuff here. This was from ICANN, which is the legal group, of course, that's been going after mask wearing and vaccine mandates for a very long time. This was from March 10th, and it's titled, "Breaking: West Virginia will now have an exemption to its K-12 school vaccine mandates." It says, yesterday, a bill that exempts private and parochial schools from the state's childhood vaccine mandates passed in West Virginia and is expected to become law. Again, this is for private and parochial schools only. It says, ICANN is pleased to announce that West Virginia's private and parochial schools will now be able, it says, to offer an exemption to the state's vaccine mandates for school children. ICANN recently supported a monumental lawsuit in Mississippi that restored a religious exemption for all elementary and secondary schools in that state. It then supported a lawsuit in West Virginia to do the same that is still ongoing, but is already clearly having an impact. Rest assured that ICANN does not intend to stop until public school students in West Virginia also have an exemption available to them, and ICANN will continue its legal efforts in the other 4 remaining states that do not yet have a non-medical exemption. Thank you for supporting this groundbreaking and critical work, unquote. Well, good. But again, the homeschooling family doesn't need an exemption, do they? Nope. They're exempt from all the nonsense. They're exempt from all the political and legal games thus far. They are exempt from all of this. And thank God for them. Because, well, they've figured it out. You can keep going and keep playing the political game, or you can learn from it and walk away and understand that the political game is also a giant distraction from you learning and being a healthy-minded human being. Okay. This next one, audio here, 10 minutes long. I'm going to play it straight through. This is from William Mackis's Substack page, where it's the Children's Health Defense Vaccine Bus. I've played audio from this particular tour before, but this was conducted on March 3rd of this year from a school teacher, an Amy McNeil. and it is titled Video Vax Injury After First Pfizer COVID mRNA Jab. So give this a listen in 3, 2, 1.
My name is Amy McNeil.
Okay. And so what made you decide to get a COVID shot?
You know, it felt like the best way to move forward. It felt like what everyone was needing to do so that we could get past this whole pandemic. I was a teacher at the time and felt like other teachers were getting it. And honestly, I wanted to protect myself. I wanted to protect others and just felt like I should go and do it.
And so you took one Pfizer shot?
Correct. I took one Pfizer on March 30th of 2021. At the time of the injection, I actually bled quite a bit. And the nurse giving the shot asked me, "Do you usually bleed this much during injections?" And I said no. And for the next few days, I just had excruciating arm pain to where I couldn't even sleep. And I ended up going to an urgent care. And I said, "I have this arm pain from the COVID vaccine. And my whole arm's now going numb." And he said, "Well, you should try a neurologist. They must have hit a nerve." And so I ended up booking a neurologist. But during that time, the numbness started traveling around my whole body. So my limbs, my arms, legs, even up to my jaw started going numb and tingling. And I just felt like I couldn't even feel my extremities. And then made it to the neurologist, and he said, "Well, I think you might have Guillain-Barré." I had never heard of that before. He said, "Oh, maybe you have Guillain-Barré from the shot." And he had somewhat believed me about it. So he did, an EMG to check my nerves, and it turned out it was normal. But shortly after, even more symptoms just started to pop up, and just every day it was a new symptom. And because he had believed me initially, I went back to him and I said, "Now my heart is racing and I'm getting this pain in my chest, and I feel like there's an elephant, sitting on my chest, and I feel like I can't breathe, and I'm getting winded going upstairs, and so my limbs are numb and my heart is going crazy." And he said, "Well, we need to get you to the cardiologist right away. This is not in my realm." And so I went to the cardiologist. Because I said I had the COVID vaccine and I'm getting strange heart pains and my heart's fluttering and it's racing, and I've never, ever had a problem before. And the cardiologist said, "Well, everyone in my office got the Pfizer vaccine and we're all fine. So I can't imagine that you would have had an issue from this. It can't be the vaccine." And obviously, from that moment, I knew it probably wasn't going to be much help. But I got, heart monitor, I got chest x-rays, I got all sorts of things. And
I've got a few pictures of you.
This is when I ended up shortly after that in the ER, after seeing the cardiologist. This is when I ended up in the ER, and I went to the ER and said, "I am suffering, I'm in pain, I can't feel my arms and legs, my heart hurts." And the ER doctor said, "Well, you must be, we're getting a lot of psychosomatic cases, and there's no possibility that this could be from a vaccine." And I said, "Well, it is, and I've had this cascade of symptoms since I got this shot." And he basically, dismissed me and said, "I'll give you some pain pills and you can go." And so from that point on, I saw almost every specialist possible because I thought maybe a rheumatologist could help me. They're used to autoimmune. Maybe my immune system is having a reaction. Same response from the rheumatologist that this can't possibly be from the vaccine. You must have had COVID. And he tested me for ever having COVID, and it was negative. I had never had COVID. And I told him, I said this was from the vaccine. And he, again, just offered me something to numb my nerves and said, "I can't really do anything for you. There's nothing wrong with you." So I was floating between different specialists, including eye doctors, because my vision started going blurry. I was seeing spots in my eyes. I couldn't look into the sun or be outside because my eyes would hurt so bad. So I saw an ophthalmologist. You're totally fine. Maybe your eyes are a little dry. And I said, no, I'm seeing spots and I've never had a problem with my eyes. So I went to different specialists, and I went to different primary, care physicians, family doctors that we knew. One especially was helpful and actually offered me and believed me and said he had heard that hydroxychloroquine was actually helping some people, and he actually prescribed that to me a few months later. And then I actually was referred by a friend to the doctor that I really credit with saving my life at this point. He was an integrative doctor, and he knew about vaccine injury. And he talked to me about all of my symptoms. And he said, I know what we need to do. And after that appointment, it was just this comfort in knowing that someone knew how to help me. So I started on vitamin C IVs and just natural supplements. And I remember what I told my family. I said I felt like pieces of my body were coming back to life because I felt like every piece had been so broken. And it felt like finally, like my cells were getting something that they needed to heal. So since that point, I have, stuck to supplements and just tried to do clean eating and really changed my entire world for myself and for my family. I'm a mom, and we've decided to homeschool our children because we've decided we will no longer get them vaccinated because now we're awake to the dangers of what could happen and what has happened to me. And in that way, I'm thankful. I'm thankful that I went through this and that God just was with me through this whole ordeal because I see the reason. I see now because He's saving, my children, and then possibly even with me sharing my story and even to friends and family in here today, that if even one person listened to, the dangers of vaccines, I would just ask you to look into it and to really research before you put something, that you're not sure about into your body. And so here today, I'm still left with symptoms that come and go. It's a strange flaring problem. So I have a lot of heart pain. There's a lot of nights, where I'll wake up in pain. I can no longer sleep on my left side because I'll feel crushing pain. And then I have twitches, muscle twitches from that initial all my limbs going to sleep. So all day long, even though you might not see them, even right now as I'm talking, my legs are twitching. So they're constantly, my muscles are constantly spasming. And that hasn't stopped, now going into my 3-year anniversary of this. And obviously, I've come a long way and some of the symptoms have disappeared, and I'm so thankful for that. But, obviously I don't know the future. And so that's scary, but I also feel that, God is with me and that whatever happens, I'm just going to rely on Him and what He has for my future. But that's where I am today.
Has this made you question all the vaccinations now?
Absolutely.
Would you ever take another vaccine again?
Never.
Finished,
Done. And my children, like I said, we will never vaccinate them. And obviously we're here in California, and children have to be vaccinated to go to school. There's really no way around it at this point. And my children are missing their Tdap booster. And so they cannot go to public or private school. So we're going to continue to homeschool them as long as needed. They're never going back because it is not worth risking their health, their life for that. So.
Well said. And is there anything else that you would like to add to this?
I just want to say thank you for giving me this opportunity to share my story. And if one person, listens and makes a different choice, that's totally worth it.
What amazes me is how many people sit on this sofa here being injured by a COVID shot and are now not going to take any vaccination. So really the dark side lose, because actually they've, weirdly enough, woken everybody up.
Right. That is exactly what happened to myself, my entire family, extended family, friends. That is exactly what happened. We saw what happened with the COVID vaccine and how many it has injured and hurt. And now we know what has truly been behind this plan, the childhood vaccination schedule, all of these things. We will never get another shot for any reason.
Thank you. Thank you for telling your story.
Thank you so much.
So first of all, let me mention a few things here. Number one, unfortunately, they have permanent heart damage. There's no doubt about that. Permanent nerve damage, of course, permanent central nervous system damage. That's not good. However, they've clearly learned from it, which is arguably the most valuable part of everything that's taken place, and she laid it out perfectly. They homeschool their children. They're unjabbed. They're not getting any more jabs for the rest of their lives. Hopefully, they're teaching their children about the dangers of these and to never fall for the coercion or the false story or any of it. And again, hopefully, that's the case. The larger thing to pay attention to, ladies and gentlemen, is this. That's one school teacher after one shot in one state. That's just one. Now do you see why the business is collapsing? Again, everybody's blindly walking right into the meat grinder, and they have no idea what they've done. Now again, has every school employee taken the shots? Of course not, and we know that that's the case, and that's a very good thing. The problem is that school boards themselves don't even know that this is going on. And if they do, which of course I've told at least a few of them, it goes in one ear and out the other. And I don't expect any of them, nor should really anybody expect any of these school boards across the United States or anywhere for that matter, to come back to the public and say, you know what, we were wrong. As a result of the words that came out of our mouths, as the result of our suggestions, and as the result of our own actions, we've hurt ourselves and everybody who works here, and we encourage people to do that, and that was our fault also, that we played a massive role in all of this. They're never going to admit that. They would throw themselves off of a bridge before they would ever admit wrongdoing in this depopulation agenda. This, too, is also why all of the insurance rates are going up, specifically within school-based environments. Every school district's insurance rates are going through the roof. They, of course, would lead you to believe, well, it's inflation and that's just the way that the market is. Nope. It certainly isn't. This is the way that it is because of the actions that you engaged in, because of the lies that you believed, because you all went along to get along. So you thought. You were incentivized with a free donut. You were incentivized with free coffee for a year. You were incentivized with a gift card, $100, whatever it may have been. And now it's cost all of you. And you still can't figure it out. I'll take it even a step further. School boards and school employees don't even know that children's health defense is a thing. They don't even know that Substack is a thing. They don't even know that endless interviews have been taking place since 2020, since the rollout of the shots, that are clearly describing individuals in all walks of life of all ages who have taken these shots and are either permanently injured, or it's permanently injured individuals talking about how their friends and family almost lost their lives or did lose their lives. They have no idea. If you were to take that audio that I just played right there from that one school teacher and play it in a school board meeting, they would flip out. Because they have no idea that people are going on the record on a day in and day out basis with what these shots have done to them. They just don't know. They're that blind. Which of course begs the question, why would you send your children to an environment with individuals running the business, so to speak, who are that blind to the realities of the world? Does that sound like a safe environment to send someone? It's amazing. It's just amazing. You talk about multidimensional brainwashing, that right there proves it. That's it. And again, bless that teacher's heart. But she said all of the things at the beginning that were all of sort of the mainstream cliche lines that were tossed out to the public. You know, we took the shots because we wanted to get past the pandemic, and we took the shots because we wanted all of this to just go away. No, it hasn't gone away now. It's gotten worse. And it's gotten worse because now all of the jabbed are hurt by this, one way or another, whether they know it or not. And that, unfortunately, is the abuse that we all have to suffer, whether we be jabbed or we not to be jabbed. And that leads me to this too, again, more of the coercion. This was part of the problem. As we know, it wasn't just schools and your average business and these massive corporations. It was the church. The church was largely responsible for wiping out their congregations because they all got the emails from their higher-ups and they all believed them by and large. And this again is from AmericaFirstReport.com. This is from also Natural News as well. It is titled Satanic Betrayal. American Christian pastors coerced congregates to take COVID jabs through covert, quote-unquote, faith for, the number 4, vaccines scheme. Here's what it says. In exchange for cash bribes from the government, thousands of American pastors pushed Wuhan coronavirus vaccines, quote-unquote, on their congregates, many of whom are now chronically ill or dead as a result. The report from America Out Loud explains that the government program called Faith for Vaccines, which was birthed out of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, vaccine propaganda machine, COVID-19 Community Corps, it says, convinced money-grubbing faith leaders to sell out their flocks to Big Pharma. It says the COVID-19 Community Corps has 86 founding members, most of them falling into the faith leaders category. They include, but are not limited to, the American Baptist Church, Catholic Charities USA, Episcopal Church, National Association of Evangelicals, Greek Orthodox Archdiocese of America, and New York Jewish Agenda. It says manipulating scripture to brainwash. Some so-called pastors were not just swayed by money to manipulate their congregates, though. It says, through careful trickery, government officials manipulated scripture and biblical concepts to convince faith leaders that Jesus wanted them to push COVID jabs on their congregates. It says former National Institutes of Health, NIH, Reverend Dr., quote-unquote, Francis Collins, yes, he actually calls himself that, spoke to hundreds of faith leaders back in 2021 claiming that COVID jabs were God's answer to prayer, quote-unquote. He urged all of them to push the shots as part of a, quote, love your neighbor moment. And then it says, quote, in what was a sermon-like address tailored to appeal to these faith leaders, Collins admonished them not to believe conspiracy theories, quote-unquote, about possible side effects, which Collins falsely said were untrue, reports America Out Loud about Collins's bizarre speech. Others in the Biden regime took a similar approach by pushing American pastors to push the shots because some of the moral obligation to love thy neighbor. And then it says many of them fell for it, subsequently crafting topical sermons about the importance of getting protected, quote-unquote, in order to protect one's neighbors against the virus, quote-unquote. The manipulation scheme began as far back as February of 2021, though it was likely hatched in secret long before that. Another program called Faith in the Vaccine, quote-unquote, was used to try to sway religious Americans to put their trust in modern medicine, in this case COVID jabs, to cleanse the country of the so-called quote-unquote pandemic. Then it says, quote, as demonstrated at the Faiths for Vaccines National Summit, powerful government officials resorted to the use of religious doctrine to coerce faith leaders across the country to use their own spiritual influence, positions of trust, and sacred spaces to push the vaccines on their congregates, says America Out Loud. It goes on here, and it says government officials claimed to know God's position on the issue of COVID-19 vaccines, failing to consider other perspectives or engage in open debate. In claiming that their vaccine theology was the correct interpretation, our government leaders implied that any faith leader with a different viewpoint opposed God or had an incorrect understanding of God. Since that time, it has become undeniably clear that COVID jabs are not the gift from God that many of these duped religious leaders and congregates believed, unless that gift was to purge much of the population through chronic illness and death. It says, quote, in reality, the purpose of the pandemic Purim was to largely target white Christian nations, which had the highest vaccination compliance rates and the highest death rates due to the vaccines, quote unquote, upwards of at least 20 million deaths and counting, unquote. Yep. I think, again, that's a lowball number. That's my personal take. I think at least 20 million is a lowball number. You heard me say a long time ago, 200 million. And that doesn't even take into account, of course, the individuals who are sick and might very well expire again from certainly heart damage within the next 3 to 5 to 7 years. So, who's to say? But they fell for it. Again, this blind obedience to government and these blind obedience to emails. And if an email comes in and it says that we should do a thing, well, then everybody has to do that thing. Ladies and gentlemen, when everybody's thinking alike, someone's not thinking. This is just going to continue to plague all of these environments for a very, very long time. And they're not going to figure it out. They just won't. Certainly, like I said earlier, there's not going to be any kind of an admission. So, there you go. Now, with that said, and in conclusion, that leads me to, of course, some tweets from Donald Trump and what people are criticizing him for, and saying again, basically bragging about Joe Biden's quote, where Joe Biden was claiming to take credit for something, which of course is killing people. And then Donald Trump on the back end of that tweet basically saying, no, it was my credit. I sped up the whole vaccine process. I'm the one that should be thanked. On one dimension, this is confusing a great deal of people and pissing them off, and rightfully so, certainly within the comments section, because they're consistently saying, you know, Mr. President, these are killing people, specifically, again, responding to Donald Trump. It's killing people, it's killed my family, it's killed this, it's killed that. It's made us sick, it's compromised our immune systems permanently, you know, we have AIDS, so on and so on. These are all the comments, again, that are coming down on Donald Trump as a result of all of this. That's the one dimension look at this. There are multiple dimensions to look at about this. Here's a particular summary, again, that's relatively recent, from greatawakening.win, where someone, again, broke this down more specifically. Again, I've been over this before, and we know the long-term depopulation plan that was in place. He had to speed this up. And the individuals who know what really is going on and what the real 16-year plan to control and destroy the world was, certainly destroy America was, this plan had to be sped up. The lesson for everybody, I think, and should have been the takeaway, of course, for everyone, is that when government says to do something, you don't have to do it. Now, unfortunately, the first thing that Donald Trump was talking about was not vaccination. He wasn't even a proponent of the vaccination at first and never even said, you got to get out there and get your shots and you got to get your shots. He said that later, but first, he spent a great deal of time talking about hydroxychloroquine and natural methods. In fact, that was the crux of his entire introduction to all of this jab talk initially. So, again, I'm not carrying water for him. I'm just trying to get people to see this multidimensionally, and that if you want to speed up the enemy's plans, you do have to play ball with them to bring them in a little bit closer so that more people can see what it is that their plan actually is. So here was the post. It was titled, President Trump and Vaccines, the Definitive Summary. Now, jury's out on that, but let's at least give it a read here. It says, given President Trump's post about the vaccines, there have been a lot of people firing up this topic again. which again, I have to remind people. A lot of people were taking that last tweet completely out of context. And myself included. I initially took it out of context, and then I had to slow down and read it more specifically. Again, it had less to do with him bragging about the shots and more to do with him talking about how it's not Joe Biden's credit per se. And frankly, of course, it's no one's credit. But even so, the plan to speed up the enemy's plans was certainly the military's and Donald Trump's. There's no doubt about it. So here again is what it says. It says, here is one of the better summaries with sources that I have seen. And again, this was from MJ Truth on X. They said, I see people blaming Trump again for the vaccine, so I put together a video compilation of Trump's statements regarding the jab. Listen closely and read every single word of this post. It says, first of all, again, these are the highlights within the audio, but he specifically is talking about the booster. He said, quote, I'll wait and see later, and then says he won't get it. I'll wait and see, and then later he says that he won't get it. The next one is, quote, FDA is bureaucratically run. It would have taken 5+ years. And then the next one, quote, I learned things. The FDA is virtually controlled by Pfizer. And then the next one, Trump got the Pfizer, but he also took Regeneron. Now, we don't know that he took a Pfizer jab or not. We don't have any proof of that. He said he did. But see, therein lies the lesson. Just because someone who's the president of the United States says that they take something doesn't mean that you should. And again, if people did and they blindly believed government, well, that's their problem. It goes on and says he has natural immunity because he got COVID. And then, again, Regeneron treatment was something that he brought up also. And he said, quote, I want people to have their freedoms. Then another quote, very early on, I took therapeutics. I showed things to the country, therapeutics. And then don't get angry. We did it in 9 months compared to 5 to 9 years, where he said, quote, I think the other side poisoned people on it. Then he also said, quote, vax manufacturers should release their vaccine data. He also said, quote, vax manufacturers are holding back information, not good. He also said, some love the vax, some hate the vax. I understand both sides. Then he also said, quote, we will not comply, no mandates. Then he said, someday we're going to have to sit down and have a little talk about vaccines. And then this is the individual's thoughts. They said, my thoughts. Number 1, do you understand that we are at war? Number 2, does everyone understand that Trump is not a doctor or a virologist? Number 3, how did you feel when the pandemic began? Number 4, how many people have you known who are or have been wearing masks, got every booster? ? Number 5, how many friends, family members, coworkers have you tried to red pill about these jabs, but it didn't work? Number 6, what if Hillary won? Number 7, final question, imagine if Trump did not become president and said he was done fighting for our country. How does that make you feel? Who do you then blame? And then they said, full stop. We are in a war for humanity. Trump is a wartime president. Wartime decisions are not easy. Wartime generals have to decide which decisions will ensure a victory and the fewest casualties. Trump did not make these vaccines. And he damn sure did not force anyone. Stop blaming him. They wanted everything locked down for many years until a quote-unquote vaccine could come and save the day. If Hillary won in 2016, they would have gotten 3 SCOTUS judges, hundreds of federal judges. Can you not see the damn problems we would have had if she had won? Never-ending lockdowns that would have absolutely destroyed the middle class and would have suffered a catastrophic economic crisis. No judicial help. As much support and love Trump has, a lot of people support vaccines. They still do. Trump did try to go against the narrative, it says, when the pandemic began and he was vilified. He wanted people to have a choice on masks and jabs, but he was vilified. He wanted life to go on and the economy to stay open, but he was vilified. He offered hydroxychloroquine and other preventative treatments, ensuring we had emergency use authorization, but he was vilified. Nothing was good enough. Americans bought into the mainstream media bullshit narrative we needed a vaccine to feel safe to open the economy back up. Imagine what life would be like if the economy, businesses were still closed today. Many will never accept the truth. They won't accept it until the mainstream media tells them so. Hell, people still walk around with masks by themselves because the mainstream media has people scared to death. Trying to speak common sense to Americans did not work. When Trump says that these quote-unquote vaccines saved countless lives, you'd better fucking believe he's not talking about the jabs. Operation Warp Speed wasn't about a vaccine. It was about giving people the confidence to open the world back up and stop contributing to their own fucking demise. To avoid never-ending lockdowns, to stop the collapse of America, the world. We were slow-boiling frogs. Trump simply turned up the heat on all of us frogs, and all of us frogs, rather, jumped the fook out, and we are pulling other frogs out every damn day. Everyone had a choice. Trump sure isn't making it for us, so blame ourselves for being asleep, not the man who did the best he could do to give us options between a rock and a hard place. And the post ends there. So I'll tell you what I'll do. Again, all of those particular points are brought up in this 11-minute long video. I'll link it in the description below of this episode. You can take a look at it yourself and listen to him talk. I've listened to it, and at the very least, what he's certainly doing is he's instilling doubt. He's trying to instill doubt in people. He's saying, look, you can take it if you want, but I'd like to see more information about it. And he goes, you know what? I don't know about Pfizer. They're owned by the FDA. The FDA runs Pfizer. Again, he's instilling doubt. And the takeaway from all of this is supposed to be very simple. If there's doubt, then the answer should be no. If there's ever been any inkling of doubt on anything, then the old phrase, better safe than sorry, which is, of course, in this case, better no than yes, look before you leap kind of thing, well, then that should be your answer. But the other takeaway should be, stop trusting government. It literally means mind control. It's Greek and Latin for mind control. That's the takeaway. Again, I was the kind of person, and always has been, that when government says jump, you look at them back and you say, F you. You don't say how high. You don't say, thank you, sir, may I have another. You say no. Because government and authority doesn't have your best interests at heart. Look at the number of bosses in these work environments that killed off their employees because the bosses believed lies. Look at the number of employees that walked away from their lines of work because they didn't want to participate in the lie. They didn't want to wear a mask. They didn't want to socially distance. They didn't want to take the shots. They walked away. But instead of the employees in that environment saying, wait a minute, we have other employees that are willing to walk away from this, walk away from their job, their livelihood, a number of other things in this work environment that they've been in for a very long time. Why? But I'm willing to stay here and take this shot and wear these masks. What is it that they know that maybe I don't know? See, that didn't happen either. I mean, I'm sure it happened with somebody out there, but it didn't happen with a great deal of people. That was the Civil War. That was another aspect of this huge Civil War, was that open division, that if you don't go along with the so-called majority wavelength of thought, then there's something wrong with you. But again, it didn't even cross the minds of people working within these environments to say, wait a minute, we have coworkers who are leaving this business permanently because they don't want to play along. Maybe I should ask them what they know about all of this. And do they know something that I don't? That wasn't happening on a grand scale. And if I was a betting person, and I've said this before on the show, What are the odds that such a thing would have happened in a K-12 or even university faculty meeting, where someone who was knowledgeable about what was really happening stood up in their own faculty meeting in front of all of their coworkers, administrators, etc., and openly said something like, hey, none of you need to take this. And you shouldn't take it because there's a depopulation agenda in play here. You're all being tricked and coerced into taking a shot that's never been given to humans ever on a grand scale. This is dangerous and this is a bad idea. Do not comply. Again, how many employees did that? Or were they all afraid and they all just, again, either went along or they left? The absence of thinking is what has gotten us to this place, which is why, again, as I've said in previous episodes, certainly here in recent time, you can't say it's not an MK Ultra program. You can't say it's not brainwashing. We're way past mass formation psychosis. This is way worse than that. This is generational, multi-decade, over half a century plus 75 years, give or take, of brainwashing. And it's worked. And now again, the people who are the brainwashed, instead of thinking, of course, and looking in the mirror and asking themselves, well, what is it that I didn't have figured out? What are they doing? They're doing what brainwashed people do. They're looking for a singular individual to blame. That's all. Trump was in office in 2020. He allegedly got voted out, although we know he didn't. Joe Biden set up his office of the president-elect, if you recall that nonsense office. And Joe Biden and Kamala Harris went from saying, if Donald Trump creates a vaccine, I'm not taking it, to all of a sudden, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris saying everybody should take their shots. So all of the Trump haters said, I'm not going to take a shot because Trump says I should. And then somebody else tells them that they should, and then they take it. You can't say it's not brainwashing. You just can't. So there you go. Thanks for listening again, ladies and gentlemen. More for Friday. Stick around, and I'll see you then. Take care. God bless. Peace. Thank you for listening to American Education FM. Make sure and check out AmericanEducationFM.com for more information. Take care and God bless.